Hey there, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation of Happiness Isn't Brain Surgery with Doc Snipes, practical tools to improve your mood and quality of life. Now, normally I do these presentations on Sunday, but it was my son's 18th birthday, so I'm a little behind the 8 ball this week. So we're going to move on to just doing it today. Play catch up. Today, we're going to be talking about cognitive interventions, and this is just kind of a highlight or hitting some of the examples of 100 plus practical tools to defeat depression, which is a book I've got coming out in October. Over the next little bit, we're going to define cognitive interventions, explore activities to address perceptions, attributions, cognitive distortions, shoulds, time management issues, and problems with goal setting. So cognitive interventions are things that you do to change how you think about things. Is the glass half full or half empty? When you walk outside, is it partly sunny or partly cloudy? Whenever I look at my apps for the weather and they tell me it's partly cloudy or scattered clouds, or they have all these different permutations of saying the same thing. I'm like, why don't you just say it's either sunny or not? But anyhow, we all look at things a bit of a different way. And if I see it as partly sunny, then I might be a little bit more optimistic. Another thing that you can do when you're looking at problems or whatever is ask yourself, is this really important to having a rich and meaningful life? Is it really important for me to agree with this person? Is it really important for me to get this particular job? Is it really important for me to do something else in order to have a rich and meaningful life? Or is that just something I want, but it's not, going to make or break anything? Another question you can ask yourself is, what is the yang to this yin? Yang is the excited, energetic, bright, happy side of things, and yin is the dark, damp, cold side, if you want to think about it that way. But generally, there is a silver lining, a bright side, and sometimes you have to put on those obnoxious rose-colored glasses to see it. But try to figure out, what is the positive that you can get out of this? Which takes us to the final question you can ask yourself: how can this event make me stronger, or what can I learn from it? So maybe you apply for a job and you don't get it and you're feeling really bummed out. All right, that's how you feel. And if it's something you wanted, then I totally get how you might feel depressed for a few minutes. The thing to ask yourself, though, is you can either stay stuck and depressed and resentful and all that kind of stuff, or say, what can I learn from this? Maybe you can go back to the interviewers and go, why didn't I get the job? What could I have done better in the interview, or what skills do I need to be more competitive for this job? So there are a lot of things that we can get from adversity if we just look at adversity as opportunities to learn and grow instead of slaps in the face. So a lot of people don't really realize the impact of their thoughts on their mood. So I really want you to think about that for a minute. And we're going to be on this slide for just a few. When you have negative thoughts, if you get up in the morning, you get up on the wrong side of the bed, you're just a grumpy Gus, how does that affect your emotions, your feelings? Well, I already kind of said that. You're grumpy. If you're looking at things, you wake up in the morning and you wake up late and it's raining outside, you're like, well, I'm late and it's raining outside, versus, well, I got a few more minutes sleep and I don't have to wash my car today. So the way you think about things will impact your feelings. You can either look at things optimistically or pessimistically. When you have stress feelings, whether it's anger, anxiety, or depression, that impacts your physiology. It impacts your brain chemicals. It impacts your hormone called cortisol, that's your stress chemical. It impacts your hormones and your libido and your sleep and everything else. So whether you're happy or you're unhappy will have an effect on your body, your health, your immune system, a lot of stuff. And I can tell you, when I'm sick, I generally tend to be crankier and more pessimistic. So it's always good for me to try to keep my body as healthy as possible. And all of these things affect our behaviors. If you are negative, if you're feeling grumpy or irritable, if you're not feeling well, you're exhausted, you're in pain, how is that going to affect your behaviors for the day? You're probably not going to be as productive at work. You're probably going to be more prone to being snitty and snappy with people, or have difficulty concentrating. So let's go on the happy side of things. If you wake up in the morning and you're just like, oh, it's a great day to be alive, we're going to the extremes here. Most of us don't wake up quite that cheerful. But if you have happy feelings, then your cortisol levels are low, your concentration levels are higher, your serotonin and some other chemicals that manage your pain and your energy and your ability to focus are higher. So your physiology is in sync. So your body's working, your mind's working, you're in sync. So how's that going to affect your productivity, your concentration, how you interact with other people, whether you even want to interact with other people? So any of these things, if they're out of whack, can bring the other three areas down. But any of these things, if it's in whack, if that's, whatever the opposite is, any of these areas that are doing well can buffer against problems in other areas. So maybe you're sick and it happens. So you've a physiological unhappiness or unpleasant place to be. Well, you could let that make you negative and cranky and withdrawn, or you could use it as an opportunity to get rest. You could think about it as optimistically as possible. Well, at least I'll catch up on some reading or my Scrabble games or whatever it is that you do. Have positive feelings about it. Well, look at it this way. At least I don't have to fight traffic and get to work today because I'm sick on my butt in bed. And one of my favorite, especially if I've got a stomach illness, is, hey, maybe I'll lose a few pounds. But all of those things, you can choose to look at illness as a big downer, which is going to keep you sick longer, or you can try to look at it as optimistically as possible. Which takes us to perceptions, which is kind of what we've been talking about. You can perceive something as negative, or you can perceive something as positive. I use the example a lot of dogs because there's a lot of people that have fears of dogs. And if you experienced an angry dog or a dog chasing you when you were riding your bike when you were younger, and that dog was nipping at your heels, that might be scary. So you remember that as a scary experience, and that's a schema, which is what they use to call basically our brain's shortcuts for things. It says, been here before, bought the t-shirt, burned it, don't want to go there again. Now me, if I see a dog running towards me barking, I'm like, oh, the puppy wants to play, because I haven't had a negative experience or many negative experiences with dogs. So we can see the same dog doing the same thing, but our perceptions really impact how we think and how we feel about that situation and what we do. Another example is people who are flying. Some people are terrified of flying and other people think it's great. Well, you're on the same airline. You're doing the same. That's your 10% reality. 90% how you perceive it. If you perceive it as being dangerous and scary and all that stuff, or if you perceive it as being great because it's a lot faster than driving and somebody else is in charge so you can catch up on your reading. Two different perceptions. Angry faces is another thing for perceptions, and I'm kind of trying to hit a wide range of things here. If you grew up in a household, especially in which there was someone with a mental health issue or an addiction, where you weren't allowed to have your own feelings, or when that person was in a bad mood, then everybody had to walk on eggshells. If you see angry faces now, you might personalize that and go, no, I better walk on eggshells around this person because they're in a bad mood. Or even worse, children tend to take things personally. If every time one of your household members, one of your parents, was in a bad mood, you thought it was something that you did, and you continue to just assume if somebody gives you a dirty look that it's something that you did, then that can be really daunting when you're interacting with other people. So I encourage people to challenge their perceptions and look back and say, what other explanations could there be for why this person gave me a dirty look? A lot of times I will be lost in my own thoughts when I'm walking down the hall, and I may have a scowl or something on my face. And, it may have nothing to do with the people that I'm walking by because I'm not even noticing them. They're noticing me. So it's important to recognize your impact on people, but it's also important to recognize the fact that you're not the center of everybody else's world. So if they've got an angry face, there could be 10 other reasons they're in a crappy mood, and they just happen to be wearing their emotions on their face when they looked in your direction. So one thing you can do to look at this impact of perceptions on your life is a coin flip. In the morning, flip a coin. If it lands on heads, you have got to put on those rose-colored glasses and be as optimistic and obnoxiously positive as possible all day long. When you start feeling yourself getting negative, you need to identify 3 positive aspects of the situation or 3 alternate explanations. If it lands on tails, you can do whatever you want to do. And at the end of the day, I want you to think about however you behave that day, whether it was a heads or tails, how that impacted your thoughts, your moods, your physical feelings, your pain and your energy levels, and your behaviors. How productive were you? How energetic were you? Another activity, because a lot of people who are watching this are probably adults, I'm thinking the majority, and you may have kids at home. Well, it's never too early or too late to start teaching children to be cognitively aware. So one of the things you can do is get a big beach ball and on it write 20 things that can be arbitrary, can be irritating or scary, and toss the beach ball to somebody. And they have to find at least one optimistic or non-threatening way to look at whatever item they see when they look down at the ball. So we'll stick with dogs for this one. You throw it to your child and it comes up dog, and they're like, okay, dogs can be really scary, but what's another optimistic way to look at it? What is another reason the dog might be barking? Maybe it's barking to protect its house. So if you're not going into its space, then it's probably not going to come to yours. So there are a lot of different ways to look at things, but this encourages people to take their most common stressors and try to find a happy restatement. For kids, there are a lot of stressors that revolve around school and tests and those sorts of things. So those things can go on those beach balls. Now, attributions are similar to perceptions. Perceptions are how you think about things. Attributions are where you put the onus on. I need to find a better word for that. But attributions say this is where it happened from, whether it's internal, it was something that you did, or it's external. So if I'm walking down the street and I trip, I could either say I am a klutz, that's internal to me, or I can say there was a crack in the sidewalk, or my shoelaces were untied and I tripped. That's an external attribution. It has nothing to do with me as a person. It has something to do with my environment that caused the situation. What's the point of this? Well, if you have a really internal locus of control, you may try to think that you control everything and everything's about you, which adds a lot of stress. If you have an external locus of control, you think that the environment controls everything and nothing that you do matters. That adds a lot of stress. So we need to be very conscious of what things we can control and what things we can't. Another type of attribution is global or specific. So, something can happen. I always use the example of math because math is not my strong suit. And I could say, after I didn't do so well in a math class or on a math test, I could say I'm stupid. When it comes to calculus, yes, I am really not good at calculus. But calculus is very specific. I am stupid means I'm stupid about everything. But when I say I am bad at calculus, well, that's very specific. And, being good or bad at calculus isn't going to make or break whether I have a rich and meaningful life. And the other aspect of attributions is it's stable or changeable. So if it's something that you can't change, like being clumsy or some of us just don't have good balance. Or is it changeable? Like your shoelaces were untied. You can fix shoelaces. So we want to try to, whenever something happens, look at what parts of it we can control, accept the parts that we can't control, make sure we're not overgeneralizing and saying, I am this way, or it's this way all the time, and then identify which parts can be changed. It's important to remember that there's always, or nearly always, good or bad in everything. If you look at the yin and yang symbol, you'll see that there's a little bit of each in each side. And that's how we balance things out. So yes, there's going to be some drawbacks to just about everything, but most everything also has at least some positives or some things that you can grasp onto as well. So activities, to figure out what your attributions are and to practice getting a more stress neutral attributional style. It's important to figure out how you think about things. If you say, I blame other people for making me unhappy, well, you know what? Other people are going to make you unhappy forever because it just happens. They may not mean to, but they may. So, okay, one way you can look at that is say, other people can do things that I'm unhappy about, but I can choose what to do with those feelings. So I can choose to stay angry and riled up and nurture it and dwell on it. That doesn't do any good. It actually, drains my energy and negatively impacts me in all those areas. Or I can say, okay, what that person did made me unhappy. I can address it in these particular ways. You can either choose to stay stuck or you can choose to improve the next moment. When you fail at something, a lot of times we say, oh, I'm so stupid. It could be that you're not good at that particular thing. I know there are things that I am not good at. Woodworking and math, those rise high. Anything electrical, that's big too. And I understand that. I try to stay away from any of those things. But I recognize that nobody's perfect, and I'm a good person, and there are a lot of things that I'm really good at. There are a lot of things I'm not, but that's okay. It doesn't make me any less of a good person. And finally, sometimes people will say things like, I'm depressed. And yes, you are feeling depressed right now. But if you say, I am depressed, that's one of those global statements that is relatively unchangeable. If you say, I am feeling depressed, feelings can be changed. And if you say, I am feeling depressed right now, well, that means that there are times when you haven't been depressed before. And yes, it's semantics. But when you start using stress-neutral words and thoughts, then it has an impact on your feelings, your physiology, and your behaviors. So cognitive distortions. These, I don't like that term. I usually call them unhelpful thoughts. It sounds much less clinical. But it basically means that a lot of us, and from the time we're knee-high to a grasshopper, we may think about things in ways that are not exactly accurate. So there are some really common ones that I've identified here. Arbitrary inference, which means making assumptions without all the facts. So if your kid goes in and takes a test and they walk out and they're just like, oh my gosh, I failed that test. I'm never going to get into college. And they go into this, anxiety tizzy. That's arbitrary inference. They haven't even gotten their scores back yet. They don't know what the curve is. There's a lot of factors that go into that. If John comes home from work and he smells like perfume and it's not his wife's perfume, she could get really upset. What she doesn't know, maybe, is that he went and he bought her a birthday gift and happened to walk through the department store and get spritzed by one of those annoying people that stands around and spritzes you. So, those are all things that can happen where we can jump to conclusions. Another common one these days is, if you text somebody and they don't text back, people can assume that that person is mad at you or they don't care about you or, something negative, when in actuality, the person, their cell phone died or in the interim they had to go to the bathroom and they chose not to take their cell phone in there and text you while they were on the potty. There are a lot of things that could explain why a person doesn't text you back right away. Selective abstraction. And whenever I work with clients, I encourage them, if they have a habit of jumping to conclusions, to identify 3 other explanations for why it happened. Selective abstraction means seeing only what you want to see or don't want to see. And I know you're like, well, why would I see what I don't want to see? If you're in that negative mindset, you could see the negative in things. And we don't typically want to see the sky falling. But if you're in that negative mindset, you're going to focus on all those negative things that day instead of, and you're probably not going to pay much attention to the positives. So try to get into a mindset where you're seeing the positive. Another example is, when you're in a relationship, a lot of times they say love is blind. Well, that's because when you're in love, especially that first 6 months where you've got all kinds of hormones and adrenaline and everything else going, you're seeing the positive. You're in that positive frame of mind. So you're not seeing any of the things that eventually start grating on your nerves. So when you have an opinion that seems to be kind of extreme, try to step back and look objectively at the facts for and against your feeling or belief, and that'll help you get both the positive and possibly negative sides of it. Overgeneralization means generalizing things about one situation to all other situations, such as saying all men are dogs because you were in a bad relationship with one or 3. But we want to look at that and say, number one, are there exceptions to this rule? What is common about the 3 men you were in a relationship with that were dogs, and what part do you play in it? Because sometimes we might gravitate towards situations that repeat themselves. So if we step back and go, what's different about your best friend's boyfriend who's not a dog? So if you can identify the fact that there are exceptions to this, and I always say 3. I don't know why. I like the number 3. Magnification and exaggeration means blowing something out of proportion. Like the example I gave, coming home after taking a test and going, oh my gosh, I failed that test. I'm going to fail out of college, never get into grad school. I'll never have a job. Or if you get in trouble at work, coming home and going, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. Then we're going to lose our house and we're going to be homeless and blah, blah, blah. People can take things to an extreme. I encourage people, when something happens, to play it out and ask themselves if they're confusing high probability with low probability things. If you get in trouble at work, what is the probability that you're actually going to get fired? You may get written up, but what is the probability you're going to get fired? So, looking at that and figuring out, is this a mountain or is it really a molehill that just feels really bad right now? Personalization means feeling like everything is your fault or a personal attack. So again, stepping back and asking yourself, what are 3 alternative explanations for this person's behavior or for this situation that have nothing to do with me? And finally, polarized thinking. That's all or nothing. And most of us do this occasionally. You notice I didn't say everybody does this because, that's polarized. That's saying everyone. I don't know everybody. But when we look at things, it's rare that something happens all the time. I mean, yes, you're born and you die. That happens. But, even eating spinach, you can eat spinach every day of the year for 5 years and be fine. And then on that January 1st of that 6th year, you eat it and get E. coli. And then maybe, 6 months later, you eat it again and get E. coli, heaven forbid. But can you say that every time you eat spinach, it gives you E. coli? No. But it just may feel like that. So we want to back up and look for exceptions. What are times that I've eaten spinach that I haven't gotten sick? So look at your current stressors, make a list of them, and examine them for these unhelpful thoughts? Are you jumping to conclusions? If so, find the facts. Are you only seeing half of the situation? If so, argue the other half. Try to find the other half. If you're overgeneralizing, find exceptions. If you're magnifying or exaggerating something or making something really catastrophic, ask yourself, what is the likelihood that things are going to get to that point? What is the probability? If you feel like it's personal, step back and find 3 alternatives that have nothing to do with you. And polarized thinking, look for exceptions. Another thing that you can do if for yourself or if you've got a family is have an emergency card, or have it on your mobile device, or have a poster at the house if you've got kids. So when people start using unhelpful thoughts, they can remember to ask themselves these questions. Do I have all the facts? Am I seeing the whole situation? Am I using moderate words like sometimes, occasionally, or often? Am I making sure not to devote too much attention and energy to something that really won't matter in a few days or weeks? And have I considered possible explanations besides it being all about me? Now, that doesn't hit everything, but that hits most of the highlights. And if you can answer these positively, then you can generally talk yourself down from a negative emotional state, or figure out what the next step needs to be to improve the next moment. So the ABCs, I've talked about these before, but we're going to hit the highlights here. A is the activating event, or whatever it was that happened. C is the consequence. You got upset, or whatever your reaction was. B are those automatic, often unhelpful thoughts or beliefs that happen in a split second. So activating event, I'm out hiking and I'm running and I turn a corner, and it's a pretty steep drop. The trail goes right next to the edge of the drop off. I'm terribly afraid of heights. So I run, I turn that corner, and I see that's the activating event. My reaction, the consequence is I get scared as crap. I'm just like, oh my gosh. So what were my automatic thoughts between the time I turned that corner and had that fear reaction? My brain said, that is a long drop. If you fall off of there, you're going to die. And you better back up because, you're not the most coordinated person in the world. Those were probably 3 automatic beliefs. Are they accurate? Yes. Are they, if we go back to those unhelpful thoughts, is it likely? Was I magnifying the situation? Yeah, the chances of me falling off are pretty slim. But that's how things happen. You get cut off in traffic. You get angry. In between there, you had this split second where your brain said that person could have killed you. They're being rude. They don't care. Da, da, da. That led to your feelings or the consequence. Okay, so let's take a happy one. You come home and you see that there are cars in the driveway, and you get this smile on your face because you know that somebody's planned a surprise party for you. The B in your mind was, I have this belief that these people are here for some sort of celebration, or we're going to have a dinner party or something. And if you're an extrovert, you thrive on that stuff. So you're like, oh, score. How awesome is that? So those are things, we do have the same thing for happy feelings. So you can change your beliefs to change the consequence. When you have an unhappy reaction, an unpleasant reaction, there's also a D and an E. So something happens, we'll stay with jogging on the cliff, and I have all those scary automatic thoughts. I get scared. So D is determine if my beliefs and the consequences are rational and constructive. Is it rational to think I'm going to fall off? Well, not if I'm being careful. And is it constructive to stand there and be scared about it? No. I back away and move on. And then E is evaluate whether the situation is worth your energy of continuing the reaction. Should I continue to stay freaked out, or just back away from the cliff and continue to go on my run. We can apply this to any situation. The D and the E are crucial because a lot of times we have this feeling, but then our beliefs and the consequences, we stay stuck and we dwell on it. That is not constructive. Constructive is saying, okay, I am angry right now. That tells me I'm perceiving a threat. How can I improve the next moment? So who says people can be miserable because they're doing, feeling, and thinking the way they think they should? When kids are about 2, they go through that why phase. Why is the sky blue? Why do I have to brush my teeth? Why do I have to go to bed? And most of the time, we end up responding with, because I said so, or that's just the way it is. And this often teaches children not to think because they learn if they ask questions, they're not going to get an answer anyway. So they start becoming passive receptacles of information and they don't question things. So I encourage you to go back and look over your own shoulds, because we should ourselves a lot. And when you have a should, ask yourself, like, for example, I should keep a clean house at all times so people don't look down on me. Okay, it would be nice to keep a clean house all the time, but should I? Who taught me this? My mother. Okay. Is there an alternate belief? A clean house is not the ultimate priority and needs to be balanced with other life demands. If I don't get everything spick and span, if I don't bleach every single week, no really catastrophic things are going to happen. So, encouraging myself to use more stress neutral thoughts. Optimism is a way of changing the perception of a situation. And when I do this in group, I have somebody describe their day, and then we talk with them about how they feel. If they said they had a really bad day, I'm like, okay, well, how do you feel emotionally and physically? And they may say drained and frustrated or whatever. Okay, cool. And then I ask the group, after hearing John talk about his day, how do you all feel? And a lot of times they'll say something very similar. My goal is to get people to understand how they impact other people. If you are happy and positive and optimistic, it's contagious. If you are negative and stressed out and cranky, it's contagious. In a family, you can do the same thing at dinner or whatever. Have people talk about how their day was. And then you can process how everybody feels after hearing about that person's day. They can feel happy for them. They can feel congratulatory. They can feel stressed out. Not only does this help the person recognize their impact on others, but it also helps them identify their own emotions, and it validates their emotions. So if they describe their day and they're just like, oh, I'm exhausted, and other people are like, I'm exhausted just hearing about it, that's very validating. Worry and regret are 2 byproducts of pessimism that drain your energy but serve no functional purpose. So I try to use the analogy like gasoline. If you've got a gallon of gasoline and that's all the energy you have, for the day, you can either use that gallon of gasoline to get stuff done and be productive and maybe go on a run or whatever it is you like to do, or you can take it and you can pour some over here in the past, and that's regret. Those are the things that you're regretting and you're using energy thinking about and dwelling on and beating yourself up for. And you can pour some out here in the future, and that's your worries. And you're using your energy worrying about what your boss is going to say, worrying about the bills, worrying about something else that you don't even know yet. And then you're left with like a 1/4 gallon of gas when you're finished to do today. Well, that doesn't leave you with much to improve the next moment. So figuring out how you can let go of regret and let go of worry is a big step into helping you feel more empowered and less helpless and hopeless and exhausted and depressed. So what do? Identify your worries. I'm worried that whatever, and then make a positive restatement. Maybe you've got a spot on your arm and you're worried that it's skin cancer. Okay, what's a positive restatement you can have about that? And you're like, well, skin cancer, you can't. You can. So if you're worried that that's skin cancer, the positive restatement is, I'm glad I'm checking my skin regularly so I can go get it looked at and addressed before it becomes a big issue. Regret is something you did in the past. You may regret that you didn't get a degree in computer science as opposed to a degree in, psychology. And yeah, okay, well, but that's the past. You can't change the past. So how can you restate that? You can either say, I can still go back to school, or you can focus on the positives of having a degree in psychology. There are a lot of different things, but you can't change that. So continuing to beat yourself up for it 10, 15, 20 years later ain't gonna do any good. It's just gonna drain your energy and harm you emotionally and physically. Positive things that you can do to help with depression. Because remember, depression is that feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that just sucks your energy and keeps you from feeling pleasure. Affirmations are positive statements that encourage you to feel empowered and optimistic, such as, I am a good person. I can do this. I will have a good day today. I choose to let this go. There are a lot of different affirmations. You can Google online and find a bunch of different positive affirmations if you can't think of your own. But it's always helpful to include affirmations during the day. So one thing you can do is have an affirmations journal where you write affirmations every morning, every evening, whenever, to help remind yourself about what you are, the positive things about you, and what you're capable of. You can do the online affirmation research to find other ways and other affirmations to apply to yourself. If you live in a household with other people, or if you're in a therapy group or something, you can do something called the affirmation envelope pass. Everybody has an envelope with their name on it, and you pass around the envelope, and every person in the group writes an affirmation about every other person. So when you get your envelope back, if there's 5 people in your family, then you have 5 little notes in there that are positive affirmations about you, such as you are awesome, you are determined, or whatever. Another thing that you can do if you don't want to do the envelope pass, because sometimes kids think that's corny, start each meal with a positive affirmation. And this is kind of how you begin the meal. So everybody goes around and says something positive, like, it was a tough day, but I made it, or I'm grateful that, yada, yada. So you're starting the meal off on a positive note. You can also start breakfast off on a positive note if you eat a family breakfast together, to encourage kids to start the day positively. Time management is one of the most elusive and devastating of all the coping skills. When you don't manage your time well, it leads to poor evaluations at work, friends getting mad at you, or failing to take care of things important, so then you're mad at yourself. So thinking about all the ways poor time management affects your life and your relationships is really important, because in order to change your time management, you have to be motivated to do it. So when you're distressed because you have too many things to do and not enough time, how does it affect you? Do you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, powerless? I know I do. So time management is a really important skill. So in the book, I talk about different time management styles. You can Google those as well. Identify your time management style and explore ways to address the pitfalls of that style, such as, I know it's a surprise, I'm a type A. So I tend to feel a lot of pressure to get things done. But that can mean that I have focus on one area of my life, and then other things fall by the wayside, instead of having a well-balanced focus. So I need to actually schedule in, if you will, time, and be disciplined about leaving work at work and focusing on the family when I'm home. Another activity that you can do with time management is make a list of all of your to-dos for this week, and all of them, and figure out how you can eliminate any that really don't matter if you don't get them done this week, like maybe taking your dry cleaning in. Maybe that can wait till next week. What can you delegate to other members of your household, team members at work, whatever? What can you combine? Like, a lot of times I'll combine calling my mother or calling my friend while I'm driving to work or driving home from work. or I will catch up on my favorite TV series while I'm doing the laundry. What can you simplify? You don't have to make a meal from scratch every night. So maybe you need to, order in for a couple of nights. The kids will be thrilled. What other things can you simplify? Maybe you can hire somebody to mow your yard if you don't have time to do that. I guess that would be more of a delegate, but whatever. And prioritize what's left, because there are some things that have to be done, like paying the electric bill, and then there are other things that you really need to get done, like the laundry. But if it doesn't get done by Thursday, it's not going to be the end of the world. You just need to get it done soon. When you set goals, you do your time management, you figure out how to eliminate, delegate, prioritize, all that stuff. Now you have stuff left, and you've got to set goals for how to get it done. Goals must be purposeful. There has to be a reason to do it. Like, I had to do laundry because the pair of pants I'm wearing today was a pair of pants I wanted to wear today. So I was motivated to do the laundry. When you're setting goals, whether it's a daily goal or a bigger goal, use a decisional balance exercise if you need to get motivated. Identify the benefits of staying the same. So for the laundry, I was looking around going, well, I don't really feel like doing it. I'd like to go to bed a little bit earlier. So those would be benefits. If I do the laundry right now, I'm going to be up until 10 o'clock, getting it out of the dryer and everything. That was a drawback. Okay. That was that. But what were the benefits to doing it? The benefits to doing the laundry were I'd have the pair of pants that I wanted to wear today that were clean and ready to go. And the drawback to not doing it was I didn't have anything else that I really wanted to wear. So yeah, I know I'm kind of rigid about that. But that's just an example of a daily goal. We want to do the same thing for larger goals, like stopping smoking and changing our thinking patterns, etc. One way you can do this is state the change I want to make is, such as I want to improve my cardiovascular fitness, or I want to be more assertive. My main reasons for making this change are, what are the likely consequences of inaction? So if I don't become more assertive, what are the consequences going to be? Which motivations for change are most compelling? Which means, why do I really want to do this? The first steps I plan to take in changing are, so you're making step-by-step goals. First, I need to learn what assertiveness is. Then I need to learn how to be assertive. Then I need to practice it, yada, yada. When, where, and how will the steps be taken? So to learn about what assertiveness is and how to do it, maybe I need to go to the library and check out a book. Okay, so I will do that on Monday. So you're setting goals that can be accomplished and marked off. Some things that could interfere with my plan to change are, maybe you've got some big project coming up that's going to distract you, or, I don't know, with assertiveness, there shouldn't be a lot to get in your way. How will I stick with the plan despite particular problems or setbacks? So if you have this big project coming along, but you do want to do this self-improvement goal, how can you stick with the plan? Maybe scheduling in an hour of me time each day to focus on that, so you're not getting behind in your plan to change. Other people could help me in changing in these ways. So with assertiveness, other people can practice assertiveness, and maybe you can role play with other people. And I will know that my plan is working when? Well, when you look back and you notice that you're using more assertive communication, when your disagreements with other people become fewer and farther between, however you're defining it. So this is a way to define goals, identify why you want to do it, identify potential obstacles and address them before they bite you in the butt, and maintain your motivation. So the way people think and perceive situations has a huge impact on how they feel. Embracing dialectics, that means the positives and the negatives of every situation, can help you feel more positive and empowered, because you can see that it's not just all bad. Just like it's imperative to add happy emotions, when we talked about emotional interventions, it's imperative to add happy thoughts. If you've got happy emotions, you probably got happy thoughts. But you need to add those in. When you notice that you're being a negative Nelly, try to add some positives to it. By practicing optimism and addressing unhelpful thoughts, you can reduce your overall stress, sleep better, gain more energy, and feel less helpless, hopeless, and depressed. Alrighty, everybody, I will see you next Sunday for, what are we doing? Physical interventions to address depression. If you like this podcast, you can join our Facebook group at docsnipes.com/Facebook, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app, or join our community and access additional resources at docsnipes.com.